So hi everyone, thank you for taking the time to join us today. My name is Kaj, and I'll just be very quickly introducing the final session in the PRCA's Equity and Inclusion Advisory Council Change for Good conference series, as sponsored by APCO Worldwide. Today's session is the last in a series of 4 over the last couple of days, and we will be focusing on the importance of social mobility within the context of creating a more diverse and inclusive PR industry for all. We're joined by a number of amazing speakers who are very passionate about this topic and also doing some really good work in this area already. And just to provide a little bit of context before we kind of kick off, the PRCA census reported recently that the number of privately educated professionals in the PR industry is 3 times the national average. And we also, of course, know that there is a strong link between socioeconomic diversity and race and ethnicity or ethnic diversity within the workplace, just highlighting even more so the importance of social mobility as a topic within this broader discussion. To kick us off, we have Sarah Atkinson, who is the CEO of the Social Mobility Foundation. She'll be giving our keynote speech this afternoon, and then we'll move on to a panel session with a number of speakers who'll be discussing some of the key challenges and opportunities for the industry in this area in a little bit more detail. Just before I hand over, just a very quick couple of points on housekeeping. Firstly, we want this to be a safe, respectful place for open dialogue and discussion between everybody. We will also be taking questions throughout. So if you just want to pop any thoughts or queries in the little chat bar at the bottom, we'll get to them as and when we can. And other than that, we really hope that you find the session thought-provoking, interesting, and most of all valuable as we all look to create a more equitable and inclusive PR industry moving forward. On that note, I will hand over to Sarah to kick us off. Oh, you're just on mute. Catchphrase of the year.
So I see, you would have thought by this stage I would have avoided it. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for that introduction. Yeah, I'm Sarah Atkinson. I'm lucky enough to be the Chief Executive of the Social Mobility Foundation. We're a charity working right across the UK. We work directly with young people from disadvantaged backgrounds to help them access opportunities, skills, support to get into the careers, professions where they're underrepresented and to get them access to achieve their potential. We work with employers. We benchmark social mobility performance by employers with the Social Mobility Employers Index, and we'll be publishing the 2021 index this autumn, sharing who's leading when it comes to social mobility practice and highlighting some key issues. And we advocate for awareness and action on social mobility right across business, the public sector, and all of us in society who can act through our advocacy arm, the Department for Opportunities. So we're hugely excited to be able to have this conversation with you today. Really pleased that you have got social mobility on the agenda as part of your diversity, equity and inclusion strategy. It belongs there. It's really important to talk about it, but it's often the forgotten dimension of diversity. There was a really good piece in the Harvard Business Review just a couple of months ago with exactly that as the title, talking about how social class disadvantage gets forgotten when we talk about diversity, and yet social class disadvantage is a feature of every economy right across the industrial world. So we've got a social class disadvantage problem, we've got a social class disadvantage challenge. My job today as your keynote speaker is hopefully to kind of open and energize the discussion by talking about why social mobility is important and why is it important now, before I hand you over to your super panel who are going to talk about the work that they're doing, the actions that they're taking, and open up a discussion which I hope will start to get really engaged and practical. But so why social mobility? Why is it a problem? What even is it? Social class disadvantage, socioeconomic disadvantage, it's about your background, it's about how much money your family has, it's about where you grew up, it's about the opportunities, the support, the networks that you did or didn't have access to. Sometimes it's about your accent, the part of the country that you live in. Sometimes it's about your family, and sometimes it's about the community. So it's complicated. It's difficult to put a finger on. It involves talking about things like money and social class that can be really uncomfortable to have conversations about. And yet it's a problem that is prevalent across every industry in this country, including PR. And it's a problem that is holding us back. A low ability child from a high income family is 35% more likely to be a high earner than a high ability child from a low income family. Your background over your talent is going to make a difference. We've only got 12% of CEOs from working class backgrounds. You're twice as likely to become an accountant, 8 times more likely to become an architect, 24 times more likely to become a doctor if you have a parent who's in one of those professions. And we know it's prevalent in PR as well. There isn't enough data across the PR industry, but every piece of data that we have, every piece of understanding that we have tells us that we have a social mobility problem in PR as well. PRs are more likely to have completed a degree in comparison to the general public. They're more likely to come from a family background where parents have undertaken higher education. There's twice as many PRs whose parents completed a university degree than there are PRs who grew up on free school meals. These are things that are uncomfortable to talk about and they're difficult to capture, but they are recognisable to us all. And PR is an industry of people, of stories and narrative, of painting pictures and of understanding the emotions and the connections between people. And PR is an industry that understands that we have a social class disadvantage problem, because we know we talk about polish. We talk about being able to schmooze. We talk about what clients will expect and want. We know we have banter about people's accents, people's backgrounds. We know that there are too many opportunities that you need to have a private source of money or the ability to live in London to be able to take up. And we know that while we don't require degrees across the sector, somehow everyone's got one anyway. So we know we have a social class disadvantage problem to act on. But why do we need to act on social mobility? Well, because of the job I do, you'd expect me to start by saying it is the right thing to do. It is the moral thing to do. But that's not just what I think, that's what people think. We all felt really angry last summer when students from low performing schools were marked down by an exams algorithm, because we know it's not fair that however hard you work, a system will push you back down because of your background. We also know it's a social problem. If groups of young people, if in some cases whole communities, feel left behind and left out of aspiration and success, the consequences for the society that we want to build and support are wholly negative. And we know it's an economic problem if social class disadvantage is prevalent. Businesses in every sector, absolutely, including PR, advertising and the creative industries, consistently say that recruiting, retaining and nurturing talent is their top concern. If we're wasting the potential of huge numbers of talented people just because they're coming from a low income background, we're not doing our business any good. You're talking through this week about different aspects and facets of diversity, equity and inclusion. And it can be tempting to see social mobility as just another thing that we have to summon up the energy to deal with. But in fact, it's incredibly interconnected with other forms of disadvantage, particularly race equity. If we're serious about dealing with race equity and about supporting race equality and anti-racist agendas, then we have to pay attention to social mobility and social class as well, because the root causes are so intertwined and the solutions are so interconnected to ensuring that we make inclusive workplaces where people can be themselves and be able to bring their talent and their background unafraid into their business. Particularly for the PR industry. Why social mobility? Because groupthink in a creative sector is a dangerous thing. Because understanding and connecting with ordinary people outside the metropolitan bubble is one of the biggest challenges that the PR industry has. Because your clients are not all drawn from one sector of the population. The power does not all sit with one group of people. Because your customers your stakeholders, your partners are all also drawn from all facets of the community. Because young people who've grown up in a low-income family will have talent and ability that you really want in your business. What's not to like about young people who are highly cost conscious? Growing up on a low income doesn't half give you an ability to understand what value looks like. Young people who have studied for their A-levels this year on smartphones from their bedrooms whilst caring for their siblings have got a level of resilience, an ability to hustle, an understanding of aspiration that the PR industry can little afford to do without. So we can't lose this talent. We can't lose access to this opportunity. The case for social class disadvantage being tackled in the PR industry is enormous. The other part of the question I was asked to kick you off with was why now? And it's absolutely driving now more than it ever has been. The impact of the pandemic on people of disadvantaged backgrounds, particularly on young people, has been catastrophic. And again, in an industry of stories and narrative, we can all understand the story of having to fight the disadvantage that persisted before the pandemic, along with the additional gaps in attainment, in opportunity, in access that have sprung up over the pandemic. There's an agenda where social mobility is at the centre of it, that PR has got to be part of in terms of political and public expectation. Whether we're talking about levelling up communities, whether we're talking about the ESG agenda for business, whether we're talking about social value for public procurement projects, all of those things relate back to ensuring that people of talent and communities that have been left out need to be part of the dialogue, and they need to be part of the dialogue now. And if PR isn't part of that conversation, then it's getting left behind. There is a heightened recognition of unfairness and the importance of business, not just government, acting on social mobility. I talked at the beginning about the Social Mobility Employers Index that we run, and the growth in the number of businesses entering and the growth in the activity around social mobility and social class disadvantage is really exciting to see. It's also not good enough, but the trajectory is of a positive direction towards social mobility in the agenda. So if you're not part of that, your clients are going to be wondering why. We know that tackling diversity and equity is a huge challenge, but we also know when it comes to social mobility that we really can make a difference. The work that my organisation does directly with young people shows how transformative offering support, opportunities, sharing skills and offering mentoring can be to young people who have the talent but not the knowledge or the confidence. It's there if we nurture it and bring it out, and it contributes to our business success. You're going to hear later from Taylor Bennett and from W Communications, who are going to talk about the work that they're doing and the impact that it's having. We can make change, we can make commitments to social mobility. We'd love to have some of you who are on this call join the Social Mobility Employers Index, work with us on the Department for Opportunities, be part of the narrative. So it's very possible. And my final point before I hand you back over to your wonderful panel is, why social mobility and why now? Because this is a time of huge change and radical thinking, not because we want it to be, but because the environment and the context has driven us to this. 3 years ago, our organisation would have had to be working really hard to persuade businesses to act on social mobility when it was much easier not to. Now the argument is different. There has been a profound shock to the economy, to our society, to our whole way of working and living. Radical thinking is happening, so build in thinking about social mobility and social class disadvantage as you make that radical change. You will never have a better opportunity to build fairness into your workplace, and you will never be forgiven if you miss it. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah, that was great. I think if there are any questions for Sarah at this point, we can pop them in the chat bar, but if not, as the panel kind of goes on, maybe then we can kind of pop additional thoughts in the chat as we go. Let's do that. So in that case, we'll move on to the panel where our speakers are going to delve into some of the issues and challenges that Sarah has touched on in a little bit more detail. I'll let the guys introduce themselves in a moment, but just up top, we are joined by Melissa Lawrence, CEO of the Taylor Bennett Foundation, Caren Davies, Senior Head of Communications at the BBC, Alex Kolawole, Senior Associate Director at APCO, and Emily Hodgson, Head of the WX Initiative at W Communications. I'll hand over to our moderator, Romeo Fs, who's founder and CEO of the Lemurus Corporation now, and look forward to seeing what we cover.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you very much for that. Sarah, thank you very much for your very interesting and thought-provoking points. Actually, I've had the opportunity of reading quite a number of the reports that have come out of your organization, and I must say it's been very useful in the work that we do in the corporate space. And I would just like to kind of reiterate the point you made about, you know, if there's anyone on this call that's not a member of the index, you should really think about getting involved and joining. All right, so I have the pleasure of being the moderator or the host for this panel this afternoon, and I'm joined by a very interesting bunch of individuals, all very knowledgeable. I must say, when I was checking out some of the LinkedIn profiles, I was wondering, you know, the imposter syndrome kind of stepped in as to whether or not I knew enough about this topic, even though I've been working in this space for a while. So what I'll do is that I will allow each individual to kind of give a brief background about themselves before we jump into the discussion. So my name is Romeo Fs. I am the founder and CEO of Lemurus PLC. We're a listed company. We work primarily with boards and C-suite senior execs in the areas of corporate governance, organizational health, as we call it, and social mobility, social equity and inclusion is part of that, as we call it. We tend not to use the word DEI. And I've been working in this space for a number of years. I've written a number of books and journals around this. And we also work a lot in the space of ESG, as Sarah mentioned. I'm going to then just jump over to Melissa and ask Melissa to give a brief intro to herself.
Thank you, Romeo. So my name is Melissa Lawrence, and I'm the Chief Executive of the Taylor Bennett Foundation, or TBF for short. And the foundation was essentially set up 13 years ago to address the need for greater ethnic diversity, specifically within the PR and communications industry. So we're very specific and niche around what we do. We offer training, internships, and mentoring opportunities for young people and employers to engage with our work. And every program that we run offers a practical opportunity for young people to build their knowledge, their insights and experience about the comms industry, because that is super important. And we're going to talk about those reasons a little bit later on. In terms of my background, I've worked in the third sector for over 20 years, a very long time, working with employers in the corporate sector, so professional financial services, to help them build education, employability and training programs with a specific focus on social mobility and diversity. That's me.
Okay, thank you very much, Melissa. Let me jump over to Emily.
Hi there. Yeah, so my name is Emily Hodgson. I am at W Communications, the PR and communications agency, and I head up WX, which is our social enterprise arm, which aims to open up the PR industry to people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. And we do that predominantly through a training program and providing outreach opportunities. Prior to joining W, I was actually at the Social Mobility Foundation, so I know Sarah very well. And there I work directly with employers to support them in their social mobility work and work with the young people, and also was involved in running the Social Mobility Employer Index, which we've already heard mentioned as well.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much, Emily. And Caren?
Hi everyone, I'm Caren Davies. I'm the Senior Head of Comms for the BBC. Got quite a wide-ranging portfolio. I look after things like BBC Sport, all the BBC's local and regional services, children's education, BBC Breakfast, 5 Live, and external affairs as well. I'm the only senior comms lead based out of London. I'm part of the senior comms team. As part of that, I'm the sponsor for training development across BBC Comms, and also sponsor the D&I kind of recruitment work streams that we're running at the BBC. I'm one of the BBC's 12 disability champions. I sit on BBC Ability Board, which is the staff network for that. I'm very passionate about social mobility, which you probably tell from my accent. I've got a strong regional accent from Wolverhampton, and definitely have had imposter syndrome for most of my career. And I'm just very passionate about the work we do around social and economic diversity. And to be here today is a great privilege, and to sit near the panellists. I can't wait to hear from them. I want to hear about best practice. I want to see how we can all work together going forward, and let's all get some ideas going about improving things in the comms industry.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Caren. And last but not least, Alex.
Hey, thank you very much. So very, very good to be part of this esteemed panel. So my name is Alex Colawo. I'm a Senior Associate Director in APCO's London office. In terms of my background, being in comms for probably around 7 years or so now, very focused on integrated communications. When it comes to all things kind of DEI, social mobility, I am extremely passionate about it. Last year, actually, I was one of the, I co-lead Europe's, APCO's Europe D&I Council with 3 awesome colleagues in APCO. And we've been doing some incredible work around kind of creating a more inclusive and more equitable company. So I'm looking forward to hearing from everyone here and get some amazing ideas on actually kind of how do we, continue to push forward what we're doing around social mobility.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you very much, everyone, for that. And for those of you who are on the a part of this event, feel free to pop your questions in the chat, and I'll jump into it and ask the panel as well. We will also have some time, hopefully at the end, to have some questions. So, social mobility has become a buzzword. Just as how things like diversity became a buzzword back in the days. Emily, let me jump over to you. What exactly, and I know Sarah mentioned this briefly in her discussion, but can you just talk to us a little bit more about what is social mobility and where does it fit within the whole D&I agenda?
Yeah, sure. I mean, Sarah summarized it quite well and explained that it is quite complex. But I think if we kind of try and kind of capture it, it's really sort of the link between a person's occupation or income and their parents' occupation or income. So essentially it's around whether your background determines your future. And Sarah already highlighted some of the stats that kind of actually highlight the fact that that is the case in the UK. And in the PR industry, only 15% of PR professionals come from working class backgrounds, which compares to 29% across professional occupations as a whole. So there's definitely a challenge within the industry. In terms of where it fits within the sort of D&I agenda, I think it is becoming increasingly something that people are looking at. As we've discussed, there's huge sort of intersection between other areas of diversity, but increasingly it's being looked at in addition to the protected characteristics. But what I would say is that varies across industries. So in my work previously working within other sectors, there's other sectors that have been looking at this for much longer than the PR and communications industry has. Within the legal sector, for example, within professional services, this is something that they've kind of been looking at for a number of years. Arguably progress is quite slow, but they have been kind of including this in their D&I agenda. I think it's a fairly new area for the communications industry, and that's why it's so important that we are addressing it, and why I'm so pleased that W Communications are kind of putting this at the forefront of their D&I work.
So Melissa, social mobility has become a little bit controversial because there are some people like myself that think that it's just diluting the whole D&I agenda, and it's just another way of white people trying to muzzle, especially straight white men, trying to muzzle their way in on the D&I agenda to get rid of the gender, the LGBTQ and ethnicity agenda. Is that true, or is social mobility, if done correctly, can be a driver to the overall D&I agenda?
Yes, so when you sort of first put that question to us yesterday, your perspective was very interesting, and I remember there was a term used about social mobility potentially being the thief of diversity, which I'd never actually heard before, so that was interesting. But from my perspective, and it is my perspective, it's a no, because I feel when we talk about diversity in the workplace, I think the immediate response is that we're talking about gender, race, ethnicity, disability, but for me, diversity in the workplace is wider, and I think it include social mobility. So Kaj mentioned earlier on that the PRCA's 2020 census stated that 20% of PR practitioners attended an independent or fee-paying school, and data from the Sutton Trust revealed that 7% of the UK population attends fee-paying schools. Within the PR industry, that's 3 times the national average that are working here who attended fee-paying schools. So there's an issue there. And with the Taylor Bennett Foundation, as you know, our core mission is to address the need for greater ethnic diversity specifically within comms. But we do anonymously collect the socioeconomic data of anyone signing up to us and ultimately getting through to our programs. And last year and the year before, I could see that over 80% of our candidate network came from or met criteria that you might define as coming from a social mobility background. So they maybe attended a state school, were first in their family to go to university, or were on free school meals at secondary school. And with our training programs and our internship programs, we ensure that everybody is paid. So training program, you get an allowance. On the internship program, we advocate the London living wage only. We do not endorse unpaid internships at all. And we do this because we know if we didn't, it would be a barrier to take part in our programs for a lot of young people. So going back to the beginning of my answer, your question, I don't think social mobility dilutes the DE&I agenda for me. I think it very much goes hand in hand.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I really asked that question to be extremely provocative and controversial, and to get people thinking. But to be completely honest with you, I think another buzzword that people are using a lot of nowadays is the whole notion of intersectionality. And I think that's where social mobility plays a very key role, because if you think about intersectionality, you know, social mobility is a very, very important part of that. So like you, I do agree that it propels the DEI agenda. And if we can actually get social mobility right within corporate, we will solve a lot of the other issues that are currently part of the DEI agenda as well. Yes,
absolutely. Definitely agree with that. And I do think intersectionality plays a big part in this as well.
Yeah, yeah. So, so Caren, the UK is seen as, you know, one of the as having one of the lowest social mobility advancements of any advanced country in the world. I think when I looked at the data, they are way below, according to the Sutton Trust, I think they're way below, they're third, you know, below the US and Italy in terms of the ability for people to climb the social ladder. And especially in the PR industry, why do you think, especially in your role, why do you think it's so important, especially in the PR sector, for this agenda of social mobility to be advanced?
I mean, from the BBC point of view, generally, and comms is obviously part of this. If you know, we have to reflect the audiences that we're serving. Otherwise, you know, no one gets any value from us, don't trust us, we have no relevance to their lives at all. And the same, like, you know, from within the BBC, obviously we're in comms, that's exactly the same. We've got to reflect the audience that we're serving. Otherwise, you know, no one's going to care about us, are they? Or think we've got anything interesting to say, and we're just not going to be doing the right campaigns and things like that. We need a diverse workforce because we need to be, you know, representing all backgrounds to make sure we are the most creative people that we can be. You know, we have to be able to represent all areas of society, and then we'll be doing our best work. When we're not doing that, we're not doing our best work, and we just end up doing things like hiring in our own image and things like that. And it's just not a, you know, diverse and inclusive place to be, and that reflects then in what we're doing.
Okay, all right. Anyone else would like to kind of jump in there as to why do you think now, why do you think this is an important agenda for the PR sector?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. I think, Sarah has highlighted this in her keynote, but there's certainly, it's more important now than it ever has been before in terms of the impact that COVID has had on the poorest communities, and particularly on young people who are looking to access opportunities, who haven't had access to laptops or a quiet place to work. But also in terms of the PR industry specifically, we're seeing sort of change in client demands. I think they're looking at kind of wanting to run campaigns that are more purpose-driven. They're looking to reach out to a Gen Z audience who are actually more socially minded, and all of that plays a part. And it's going to be increasingly, I think, important for us as agencies to respond to that kind of client need and that consumer need as well.
Yeah, yeah, and also, there has been so many, let's call it errors in judgment made by companies in terms of their communication, their advertising. We've seen it all the time, and I think that if we had more people working in the comms department or the PR department who are from more diverse and from a different socioeconomic background, they could probably put a finger up and say, hey, that's just not cool. That should not have happened. One that came to mind is the last debacle with H&M and that image of the young boy with the monkey on the hoodie as well, right? So it's very important. But Alex, I know that you were in our conversations. I know that you were part of the Taylor Bennett, Foundation, and you transitioned into the role of PR, based on the work that you've done there. Can you share what was your experience like, doing that transition?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the first thing I'll mention is that I should have mentioned it in my intro. I am an alumni of the Taylor Bennett Foundation. I don't want any funny looks from Melissa later. But honestly, the Taylor Bennett Foundation is an absolutely incredible program. And without the program, I honestly would not be in the PR industry today. So it's a real honor to be sitting here. I think what the Taylor Bennett Foundation does, just in my experience, is it really prepares you for kind of what to expect from a skills perspective once you get into the PR industry. And I think one of the things I really struggled with, because I'd never heard of PR as an industry before. And I think it just goes to show you the sort of people that the PR industry attracts, because I'm one of those guys who, before a corporate office job, I was working in retail, right? And I graduated and I had literally nowhere to go. And I just came across Taylor Bennett Foundation on Twitter. And I think what happened is the transition from the Taylor Bennett Foundation to work was a bit of a scary one once I got into the industry, because I think everyone talks about imposter syndrome a lot, but actually once you get into a corporate environment where you look around and no one looks like you, no one sounds like you, you start to freak out a little bit and you start to question actually whether you should be here, and you start to question your talent a little bit. And I think it's very important for companies to create structures that make people actually feel like they belong here. And actually, I think one of the things a lot of companies go on about is their culture. Well, our culture is amazing. Our culture is this, our culture is that. But actually, I think companies should actually do away with talking about culture, because actually you don't realize speaking about your culture so much kind of implicitly excludes quite a lot of people. Let your employees actually dictate your culture for you. So I think that's one of the things I kind of thought when I went into the industry. But I think, there was a couple of programs I can mention in APCO Worldwide that were put in place in terms of career coaching. There was a lot of things where people were intentional about ensuring that I was matched up with a mentor that had like my background, for example. And I think, these are some of the lessons that some other companies can take on. But it was a scary transition around, particularly around imposter syndrome. I hope that answers your question.
No, definitely, and it's good to share share your experiences. Anyone else would like to contribute to that in terms of what do you think some of the barriers would be in terms of, and the reason I'm asking this is I remember reading a study done by Dr. Sam Friedman from London School of Economics. And in the research, it was pointed out that people from a middle class and upper class background who went to a Russell school or a Russell Group university and graduated with a second degree honors ended up getting far more prestigious work than students from a low socioeconomic background who went to the same Russell Group school with a first class honors. So, what are some of the barriers that would prevent individuals from these backgrounds from actually getting some of these roles? Melissa, can I jump over to you?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think there are three things that tend to be sort of lacking with sometimes. There are three gaps, shall we say, with young people who sign up to the Taylor Bennett Foundation. And as you know, as I said, we focus on ethnic diversity, but I'm talking about diversity across the board, including social mobility.
Mm-hmm.
The fact is that they tend to not know a lot about the industry. And I think that's just because sometimes there's a culture thing and there's an education piece missing. So lots of people who sign up to us will either know a bit about consumer PR, consumer comms, financial, strat comms, maybe fashion PR, sports, but they won't know about, the sort of real breadth of opportunities that are available. So, they're just falling into comms by accident. I hear that a lot. The second gap is not knowing people that work here. They do not have the professional network. So
right.
I will freely say, and I'm hoping people will freely admit this with me, that this industry can be a bit cliquey, and I will say it's across all sectors. There's pockets everywhere, a little bit of elitism everywhere, but in this industry there is a lot of that. It's who you know, being in the right place, right time. And I will say, once people become part of the Taylor Bennett Foundation network, alumni, if you like, then suddenly they're a hot property, they're a hot proposition because of the things that we put them through. But then the next gap that's missing is kind of, what next? So for lots of young people that sign up to us, they've not had experience of working in comms. Sometimes people who are from a more advantaged background, they will have, as I said, they'll know people that work in the industry, so they would have had some work experience for an Insight Week, or they shadowing someone, and the jobs are not always openly and transparently advertised. If I want to, apply for a job in law, there are some specific places that you can go to. The jobs are there, but within comms, it might be on someone's website or on LinkedIn. A lot of headhunting goes on. And if you're not part of that, because of whether it's coming from a disadvantaged background or lower socioeconomic background or being from an ethnic minority, those are some of the key barriers. And, not to blow our own trumpet about the foundation, but we try to address all of those things through all of our programs, whether you're taking part in training, mentoring, or internships. And I've only been at the foundation for 2.5 years. We've been going for 13 years. And, one of the questions was, why is social mobility important now? Why is ethnic diversity important now? Obviously, for the foundation in the last 12 months, a lot has happened in the world. Even in the last, few days, a lot has happened that has brought this to the forefront. But I think social mobility has always been important for a very long time, but it just comes in waves. The charity that I worked for before, which is a very prominent social mobility charity, has been around for 25 years. And way back when I was working with them, 19 or so years ago, super important. There was a key reason why they were set up to address social mobility within professional services. But as I said, those are some of the barriers from my perspective.
Okay. Emily, I'm going to jump over to you and pose the same question as well. I mean, what do you think are some of the barriers that exist as far as this agenda is concerned?
Yeah, I completely agree with Melissa. There's definitely something around kind of understanding what the industry is and navigating that. And I think employers have a part to play in kind of helping to educate people from school age really, who are, at that point of thinking about their career options, and that's something we kind of tried to do through outreach, including with the Social Mobility Foundation. I think there's another part of it, which is actually when they get to the recruitment process itself. So you've already highlighted the fact that actually once you've got a degree, perhaps from a Russell Group university, that they're still facing barriers when they go on to apply for roles. And part of that, as Melissa's mentioned, is about having sort of work experience on their CV. And if you have to do that for free, that's a barrier if you come from a lower socioeconomic background, which is why we pay all of our sort of WX interns the London living wage. But also, it's actually, I think, training staff as well internally. So you're hiring staff to make sure that when you're assessing people at interview stage, or even when you're looking at a CV, and ideally not looking at a CV actually, so that you're not making any judgments based on their university or their schooling, that you're sort of training staff who are making those decisions to make sure that they're actually making decisions based on the skills needed for the role, and not other things which might be kind of cultural capital, as it's called, and people in the image of the existing employees that you already have. And that's one of the things that kind of we saw in the index. Employers were trying to change their kind of recruitment approach, but also through WX, what we're trying to do is actually sort of positive action to make sure we're providing, those roles specifically reserved for people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. So they have an opportunity to come in, get extensive training, but also prove themselves, and see that, they are sort of very valuable and talented people that we want within this organisation.
Okay, all right, brilliant. Caren, do you think companies can be more proactive where this is concerned? And, in the process of doing that, can you just give us an examples of some of the things that BBC is doing in this space that, that are working?
Yeah, I think we've all got to be more proactive, haven't we? We all want to get, more diverse workforce, and we want to do that. So that's kind of top of our agenda. The BBC as a whole, I think we're the only media organisation that's in the Social Mobility Index. Maybe different this year. I think we're like number 21 this year. And do lots of things. I think we've got entry-level schemes we're doing absolutely brilliantly on. And I think by 2025 we're going up from 290 apprentices to 1,000 across the BBC, and BBC Comms will be part of that as well. So we have lots of entry-level stuff. I think the big challenge now for the BBC is actually once people are in, like Alex talked about, and the kind of how you actually retain people and what's the next steps for progression within that. So we're looking at things kind of like new senior leadership programs, unconscious bias in terms of training for people. Obviously, when people go into interviews and they're kind of faced with someone who may, sounds like them, is a bit more polished. Oh yes, I've just been to Val d'Isere on holiday. Oh yes, me too. They already get a rapport going on, that kind of thing, and how we can get that out of people. So when people come with a different accent, it's not judged. Unconscious bias is kind of dealt with as well. So that's all quite interesting, because I think the BBC is doing entry level really well, but it's kind of what is that next stage and how we do, improving what we're doing inside to keep people. Mentoring opportunities for people, and in terms of constantly making sure that every member of staff has a mentor, big career coaching, that kind of thing, like placements within the organisation to try and help people progress to try different jobs, even for a couple of weeks a month. These are the people that are already in to try and get them to move on, to help them to progress a bit more. Reverse mentoring is another thing we're doing, which is really interesting. And it's been, and people in the top level of the BBC have been doing that. It's been a real eye-opener for a lot of people. So that's going to be rolled out to a kind of a wider audience, if you like. So that's really exciting. In fact, I was offered to be a reverse mentor, but I want to reverse mentor somebody myself, because I feel obviously that I'm working class and I kind of want to give my opinion on everything. But anyway, yeah, whether I'll get to do that, I don't know. What else are we doing? That's it really, I guess, and for all that stuff. I think that I'm really interested in what we're going to do about the senior leadership programs, how that's going to work, and the role modeling of inclusive behaviour. I think that's kind of really important, isn't it?
Is there anything that you would say you guys have tried that you can share that just did not work, and you would say, try and stay away from stuff like that? Is there anything you can think of?
Oh, I can't think of anything. I mean, I think it's ever evolving, isn't it? I think all of us, we're always learning and always wanting to improve, aren't we? Like just within comms, we've rolled out a new recruitment diversity kind of checklist, and making sure what we're doing in recruitment terms, and simplifying our job adverts, or making them a bit more exciting than normal corporate kind of boring job ads, make them more accessible to people, putting videos alongside job adverts, all that kind of stuff we're doing. But that's ever evolving. We're kind of talking to all our staff, and asking them to do a bit more about recruitment, to be much more proactive about various aspects of it. They're also feeding back to us on what doesn't work or what we can still do to keep monitoring what we're up to. I can't specifically, it's every, we've always got to keep learning, haven't we? We've always got to keep improving and checking what we're doing and how we can push the extra mile each time, aren't we? And outreach is, I guess, for me, for comms next, the outreach is really important now. I want to be getting out to schools and working with partners like PRCA to kind of get out there and tell people all about comms, because I think what you touched on earlier, kind of the mystery of the comms industry is that people just have no idea what it is. I think I said to someone yesterday, my mom doesn't even know what I do. After 20 years, it's kind of, what is it you do again? It's that kind of thing around comms and PR, isn't it? And I think people, so kids in a school in Wolverhampton, where I'm from, wouldn't know what it is. And I just want to get to those guys and say, there is something here for you. You've got something to give. And let's go and do that and find those people that come into the industry.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. Thanks for sharing that. I mean, Alex, I'm going to jump over to you now just to kind of ask, what do you think can be done better in the PR sector to help drive this agenda to attract more people from the socioeconomic background to the industry?
Thank you. It's a really good question and something I'm extremely passionate about, given kind of this is where I'm sitting. So I think what I will start with is talking to you kind of, I think there's some stuff we need to focus on internally first before we even start to look out externally, because the PR industry has to get itself in order. And I think paying very close attention to creating an inclusive environment where individuals feel like they're in an organization that they can thrive is probably the most difficult part before you even go out and externally, creating all these initiatives and programs. And I think the first part is that the leaders and individuals within companies actually have to understand why we need to create an inclusive environment. And I think there's a big education piece that needs to be paid attention to here. Just remembering, Sarah Atkinson gave an excellent introduction, actually, why social mobility. A lot of people actually have no idea why we talk about it and what it means and the impact of it on an organization. And, I think for a long time, people used to think social mobility is about creating these beautiful stories of someone moving from a council estate to the CEO of a FTSE 100 company. It's far from that. It's actually about realizing that, the impacts of socioeconomic backgrounds on the opportunities it creates for individuals. And actually, a diverse workforce is going to be a most productive workforce. So I think people just need to understand it from a business perspective. I think a couple of ideas, just looking at some of the APCO examples that we've done is, I think, like I mentioned earlier, companies really need to do away with culture. It's so tedious because I think, like I said, employees should dictate your culture. And if you talk about a culture of being high performing and open and accepting to everyone, someone looking at that externally might think this sounds like a lot of waffle and it sounds quite cheesy. But I think people should pay more attention, actually focusing on what can I do to attract the people I want to attract, rather than shouting about a culture that probably does not exist. I think recruitment is important. So your recruitment has to be as widespread as possible. So you should be recruiting in places that attract people from all socioeconomic backgrounds. I think that's extremely important, regardless of their age or their background. And I think there needs to be an intentional focus on actually recruiting diverse socioeconomic, ethnic people from different cultures and pushing them into positions of influence and leadership, because the truth is that a junior person from a low socioeconomic background coming into the industry, especially the PR industry, you look up and you think, gosh, these people, they don't even look like me, they don't sound like me, they don't understand me. So I think that has to be an intentional thing. And I think lastly, I'll say from an external perspective, the PR sector for too long has been quite passive around this. I can't believe it's 2021 and we still are talking about, we still hear excuses from people saying, oh, there's just not enough talent, or, it's hard, and, we're really, really trying. And I look at organizations like the Social Mobility Foundation, the Taylor Bennett Foundation, it's just churning out incredible talent, and people's excuses just, we don't have enough. It's incredible to believe. So I think stuff like blind recruitment, doing away with CVs is important. Partnering with organizations like, the PRCA, the Taylor Bennett Foundation, Social Mobility Foundation is absolutely important. And I think, recruiting, in diverse places, like I mentioned, is absolutely important. And focusing on internal trainings is a big part. So I think, often companies start these initiatives they get excited, because, Black Lives Matter kicked off last year, or everyone all of a sudden is scrutinizing the fact that the industry is overwhelmingly kind of people from upper class background. And I think people just need to just keep up the fight, because sometimes we run out of steam after a year because the scrutiny goes, but actually being able to stay consistent, you'd be interested to see in a few years' time kind of who are the people that are still running these initiatives or who have got tired of it. That would be the real measurement. So that's my perspective.
Yeah, some very good points. I mean, Emily, before I jump over to you, Melissa, Alex made a really good point about the fact that, and I see this in corporate, I work, at the junior level, lower level, they can show you the diversity, but when you look at the senior level, there isn't anyone there, and the excuse is always, we don't know where to find these people. So how important do you think that role modeling is, and especially in the PR industry where you do a lot of this work, where can they find this talent to get to the senior level?
When Alex was talking, I had to be mindful of my head not rocking off my neck because I was just in agreement.
I picked it up. That's why I came to you.
Honestly, there was so much there that was resonating with me, and I will say, retention and progression is unfortunately a bit of an issue in this industry. And again, I'm speaking widely, not just focusing on ethnic diversity, social mobility as well. It applies to where I worked before. And as I said to you, 80% plus of our candidates are from a socially mobile background, or that indicator. But we are oversubscribed with all of our programs. Last year, 660 young people from a BAME background, a Black, Asian, and minority ethnic background signed up to our programs. Because of the pandemic, we didn't have as many opportunities. We had 99 opportunities, not a lot. But my point is, there were 660 young people that wanted to apply for mentoring, for internships, for our training program. They are there. So when an employer says to me, we don't know where to find diverse people, we don't know, they're not applying for our opportunities, they're not getting through the recruitment process. I definitely, as Alex said, there needs to be some looking inward first. So, one of my things is that employers need to focus on a strategy that focuses on attraction, retention, and progression. So, in recruitment, track everything if they can. Where are people applying? How far are they getting through the recruitment process? Where are they falling down? Is there anything that employer can do? So some employers are now not even saying you need to send a CV or a covering letter. They might ask you to do a video about yourself, create something creative and submit that instead. I think Edelman, their internship program, you apply for an app and you answer a few questions. But equally, as you just said, there's a lot of diversity in the junior and entry level points, but working your way through, I understand from some of our alumni that there are myriad reasons as to why they may not be progressing. Some of it's, individual, some people are just not quite ready yet, but I hear a lot about blockers not having access to, certain pitches, certain clients, not having voices heard and being able to be part of particular conversations. It's a variety of things. And I think, as I said, we just need to, or employers need to kind of step back, look inwards and think, are we, one, creating that inclusive environment and giving people the opportunity to grow, to be nurtured? Alex mentioned about, pushing people forward. Well, actually, we shouldn't be pushing people forward. As I said, there should be things in place that people feel empowered and, as I said, nurtured and invested in to grow within organizations and to be at the positions that actually Alex is in. We have his profile on our website as a successful case study, and entry-level young people coming through, they will say to me, oh, we looked at your case studies. We can see that person has reached that point. That is inspiring to us. That is motivating to us, because sometimes when they're looking at companies and they look on the careers page and the boards of certain agencies, it's off-putting. That stuff needs to be addressed.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. When we work with with companies and they keep mentioning, oh, we don't know where to find these talent. We're like, you're not looking hard enough. And even if you don't, you know, try and find the high potentials that are within your organization, who you can support with the coaching and the training required so that they can move up, because the role modeling is very, very, very important. Emily, I'm just conscious that, you know, there's so much that we can talk about in the space, but I really want to get to the whole notion of, you know, how do we measure and track this? Like, you know, one of the big things we find working with organizations around this space is that they say, well, you know, how do we know this works? You know, what's the return on investment? So, you know, do you have any ideas in terms of how companies could do this?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think one of the first steps that is important for companies that are looking at this to take is to start collecting data. So in the same way that you collect diversity data in terms of ethnicity, sexual orientation, actually including socioeconomic background questions in that survey. It's slightly more complicated to collect that data, but we're collecting things like school types, the type of school our employees attended, their parental occupation, whether they were eligible for free school meals whilst in secondary education, and also whether their parents attended university, so whether they're the first generation in their family to go to university. And I think that's a really important step because it gives you an idea as an organisation kind of what the picture is internally. It also helps you kind of advocate for that internally with your other employees to show, look, this is what the situation is, and this is why we're taking these steps to try and diversify our workforce. And also it helps you monitor progress, as you say, so then you can see if there is a change in either or a positive, or if it goes the wrong way, you can keep monitoring that change. The second thing I think is to look at whether you can set targets around social mobility. That might be recruitment targets, but it might be things around, you know, are you going to do outreach in different parts of the country, for example, and are you going to set a target for that over the next 5 years and putting a real strategy in place? Quite a lot of organisations will monitor how many of their candidates who are applying come from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, so they can see if their outreach is working, and that's increasing. But I think it's really important you also then look at whether that translates into offers. It's not enough just to have people applying, they have to be securing the roles, and again looking at what that looks like. And as Melissa mentioned, there's things like the recruitment process itself. If people are falling down at particular stages of the recruitment process, making a change that, but then also continuing to monitor that to see if the pattern continues to be the same. And then I think finally, the other thing is sort of asking internally around the culture. So conducting an anonymous survey to see how people feel, and how people feel depending on their background. So how do your colleagues from lower socioeconomic backgrounds feel compared to your colleagues from higher socioeconomic backgrounds, and what is the difference in terms of their views of the culture internally? And then seeing how that changes over time once you've put in some of the steps we've already talked about.
Okay, brilliant. Those are some really, really good points. And I was just looking at some of the questions in the chat. But Carrie, if you're still on, can you just check out the chat for us as well, please? And one very interesting question that I just saw popped up in the chat, and I thought I would throw it out. It says, talking about imposter syndrome from the other side, how can a middle-aged, privately educated, double-eek, white, privileged bloke be an ally and not just a tick box? And I'd like to start that off with Caren. Any ideas?
Oh, it's a tough one, Mark. It's a tough one. I mean, he needs to be able to obviously speak up on behalf of, you know, people from a different background, and talked about the unconscious kind of bias training earlier. It's that kind of thing. It's reframing your own thoughts, because it's, you know, it is unconscious when you kind of judge people on certain things you don't realise you even are, do you? That's the whole point of it. So I guess it's people thinking about those things and really being conscious of that potential unconscious bias and addressing that with their daily lives and becoming an ally. I mean, like the BBC obviously have allies for LGBTQ, for all aspects, for obviously BBC Ability and all the rest of it. It's kind of, it's, you know, maybe it's time for that as well, to stand up and be an ally for socioeconomic diversity as well. Yeah.
Alex, I see you nodding. Any recommendations for Mark?
No, I was just completely agreeing with all of Karen's points. It's absolutely spot on around the unconscious bias. I think what's interesting to note is that I think sometimes people get quite defensive of actually their backgrounds. So I think sometimes some people might think, oh, gosh, it's bad that I'm privately educated, or it's bad that I was, I'm in a middle class or upper class household. Like, I don't think anyone has a challenge of that. I think people have a challenge with when people try to articulate how someone from a certain background or certain culture should feel about a certain scenario. So for example, I can say a middle class individual might say, that thing that happened regarding that, someone from a low socioeconomic background might have found quite offensive, might tell them how to feel about it. But actually, that's a very wrong way to approach it, because I think you don't know kind of that person's background. You don't walk in that person's shoes. So I think the challenge is that when people from different cultures try to dictate how other people should feel from other backgrounds, that's such a challenge. So, I remember I had a conversation with some colleagues last year where someone said that, oh, the whole Black Lives Matters movement thing must have, really, really affected you. But do you not think people are taking it to heart too much? And I was like, well, you can't really tell me how to feel, because you are a director who has never ever walked in my shoes, and you have no idea what my background is. So my perspective of life is different to yours. So I think, to answer Mark's question, in terms of being an ally, I think being prepared to listen and have, very honest and uncomfortable conversations. I think people are scared of having uncomfortable conversations, but I think growth comes when you have, those honest conversations. I remember I had this conversation with a director that gave me this feedback, and his perspective was completely blown. He couldn't believe kind of why I view things the way I viewed it, but it just helped make so much progress. And I'd like to hope that I've had some sort of impact on his perspective going forward. So I hope that answers your question. Being quite open-minded is so key.
Oh, definitely. And I also think, like, for us at Lumos, we talk about the triple A's. A lot of people just, throw that this allyship word as well has just become such a buzzword these days, especially in the D&I space. But we talk about the three A's, the triple A's. It's allyship, advocates, and ambassadors. And people will fall in different part of the spectrum, right? So, you have people who are allies who identify with the cause and will give their support. You have the advocates who will speak up and represent. And then you have the ambassadors. Those are the ones who will take up the submarine gun and be on the battlefield with you, right? And people need to choose where they want to be, right? And you all can play your own part. But I think that, whether or not you're an ally, advocate, or an ambassador, coming back to the whole point of retention and promotion, is being a representative for those of us when we're not in that room. I've worked in senior leadership for a long time, especially in the consulting world. I'm pretty sure similar in PR. And when you're doing promotion, is that, you have someone, they call out your name, and then someone is there advocating for you, whether or not you're going to get the promotion or the bonus. And if you don't have someone in that room who represents you and is speaking up for you, you're not going to get that promotion. You're not going to get that bonus. So the allyship is about representing people from a socioeconomic background or from a protected characteristics when they're not in the room, right? So that could be a first step that people could actually take. Just before we kind of close off, I'd like each person just to kind of give 2 or 3 steps that they think either as individuals from socioeconomic backgrounds can do, or organization can do to improve social mobility in the industry. I'm going to jump off with Melissa first. And if there's anything else that you'd like to contribute as well, feel free.
Thank you. I'm going to try and be succinct. So I think my first thing is I just think every organisation always needs a strategy. So sometimes we get people that will approach us and ask for support, but actually, the strategy, the thought process behind that work, that hasn't happened yet. So therefore, how do you know where the issues are around maybe attraction, retention, or progression? So creating a strategy, definitely. collecting data and analysing it. There's a saying, what doesn't get measured doesn't get done.
Yes.
But that's really important. And I know sometimes collecting data can be difficult, it can be tricky, but it's not impossible. And I just think employers need to work out what really is important to them, and that can be a small thing. I think the other things to do is to ensure that there are different ways to access opportunities. So we've spoken a lot about graduates, having a degree, but actually, particularly in the PR industry, you don't need a degree to work here. So, I know companies that have Kickstarter programs, they have apprenticeships, they've got graduate programs, or they've got experienced hires where you can join after you've done something different. So different routes in are great. And then training, just making sure that everyone has training, not just unconscious bias training, which I'm not a fan of in isolation. I think you need to do lots of different things, and it needs to be led from the top of the organization, cascading down. This isn't, one person's problem or, a HR team's problem. It's everybody's, because it's so integral to the business, diversity. And then finally, collaborate with others. There are industry partners that work with each other. So Prime and Access Accountancy do great work around social mobility within the legal sector, within the accountancy sector. There are charities like the Taylor Bennett Foundation, the Social Mobility Foundation. So as an employer, if you're small, you don't want to reinvent the wheel, you don't have the resources, you can collaborate with others. There are so many opportunities out there. They don't all cost money. They don't all require you to have huge resource. So it's just about, for me, putting the effort in. But those are my final takeaways, if you like.
Thank you, Melissa. I'm definitely going to reach out to you. So, Caren, can I ask you as well? What are some of the things that you think either individuals from these backgrounds or organizations can do to help to improve this agenda in the PR industry?
I think everything Melissa said, it's just obviously spot on, isn't it? We all want to do that, don't we? I think everybody who's on this call is here because we want things to improve and to make a better industry, don't we? So I think from my point of view, from BBC Comms, I think working in partnership, doing collaborations is so key. I think, we're all working in silos in different parts of the comms industry. Let's join together. Let's launch a big scheme that's kind of comms focused. It goes around the country, whatever, in terms of outreach and entry level stuff. Let's all join together and see what we can come up with, obviously with the PRCA and the various groups they're doing too. But let's kind of make a big impact, rather than doing little things all over the place. Let's do something together going forward, and let's see if we can get something off the ground. I think that'd be really good. I think the tracking data is just really important. Like Emily said, the BBC, we do track all those things Emily talked about, and you see all our results published in our annual report, and we're looking at those, and we've got senior leadership indexes now, as everyone's really targeted on exactly what we're achieving. Everything's been checked all the time. That's just so important to see what we've got, what we're dealing with, and if we're moving forward, if we're not, why. Just questioning ourselves all the time to make sure we're improving things. I don't know. I just want comms to be something that feels accessible to people. I don't think it does. So that's part of a big job for all of us to do that. I want this industry to feel that it reflects the society that we're living in, and it's not, is it? So we've all got to be really proactive, but also really, really positive and really creative in how we reach people. And let's give people a chance. And then once they're in, it's sort of talked about, obviously everyone's sort of talked about it, but it's the progression once they're in. It's very easy, I think. Even with the BBC, we're getting, a hell of a lot more apprentices in, and that, by default, the socioeconomic percentage of workers at the BBC will go up because the entry level will be a higher percentage.
Yes.
But then how we're making that percentage maintained across all the levels and increasing to senior leadership, that is really crucial once they're in. I haven't got all the answers to that one, but that's something we should definitely pick up afterwards as well, and kind of how we're going to all do that too. That's it. Yeah.
Okay. Brilliant. Thank you, Caren. We'll definitely be talking. Emily, can I jump over to you?
Yeah. So it's been said. I think data, really, really important. Check that. The second, I think, is around senior buy-in. So making sure that you've got buy-in from the top of your organisation. Every organisation that I've ever sort of worked with on their social mobility work said that's been key to driving it. I'm lucky to have a founder and a chief exec that is driving this within W, and I think that's really the first step. And also making sure, some of those things that we talked about that you might be monitoring, that you're monitoring at board level. So you've got that kind of scrutiny really, and that's kind of a core part of your business objectives. And then I think educating staff is really, really important. And one of the things you mentioned actually earlier, I thought was quite interesting about the allyship, is also thinking about things from a social mobility perspective. So even if you don't come from that background, actually there's individual actions you might be taking that have an impact. So that might be offering work experience to a nephew or a client's child. And there might not be a way of actually ever stopping that happening, but it's also thinking about that as, okay, is there another child that I can offer an opportunity to who wouldn't have that network? And trying to kind of take those actions and be responsible for your own actions that might be having a negative impact on social mobility for other people. And then, as has already been said, I think making sure that you're providing opportunities as an employer and routes in, and various routes in, that allow people to access your organisation from different backgrounds.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that, Emily. I like the idea of, I like that suggestion about, you know, if you're offering a position to a client or your nephew, also look at, okay, how can I offer something similar? Yeah, I think that's a great point. Alex, any for, I know you've kind of threw out a lot of suggestions over, but you know, just anything else you'd like to add, you know, in terms of whether or not individuals from that background or organizations can do.
Yeah, sure, definitely. I think honestly, Caren, Melissa, and Emily's covered most of it. To be honest with you, I think the only thing I'll add is the accountability point. So I think we've got to find a way to hold companies accountable on all things social mobility, DE&I, anything around kind of creating an inclusive workforce. I think we have to get to a point where, you know, it starts to impact organizations' ability to be competitive from a business perspective. I think, you know, this might sound really controversial, but it should almost start to hit companies where it hurts, right? So like if a company's entering an award, right, if we're looking at your staff mix and, you know, we only got a certain, you know, your employees look a certain way, or, you know, you don't have a diverse socioeconomic background, you know, you should not be able to win that award, right? Or like some of the stuff that Emily said, you know, if we track the data for a certain year in terms of kind of employee response or how employees view your organization in terms of whether it's inclusive or not, if we measure it the following year and you've gone down, there's got to be a way to kind of keep companies honest on that. So I just mentioned the accountability point, and the other thing I'd mention is transparency. So there's a lot of things once you get internally, so much is hidden. I don't know whether that's just a corporate thing, but transparency around salary bands, gender pay gaps, socioeconomic makeup. There's a lot of fluff you can put in it, especially when we work in the PR industry. But again, that's got to stop, because I think it's 2021. I think last year everyone's spending time at home. They now have a lot more energy to scrutinize a lot of things that companies are doing, and they're seeing through a lot of the nonsense I think companies are coming out with. So I think just realize it's going to affect you eventually. It's just whether you're going to keep up or not, or get ahead of it.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, you know, we spoke about the whole idea of strategy. We spoke about data, you know, which is so important. You know, a lot of times you hear companies mention, oh, we're very diverse, but then when you dig down in the data, then it's a completely different scenario. We spoke about outreach and how important that is. We spoke about progression. You know, we spoke about inclusive culture. We also spoke about, you know, the importance of measuring and so that we can improve. And the very, very important point is that of transparency. You know, companies should really consider reporting on their pay gap, whether it's gender, ethnicity, disability, whatever. And then you will see the massive disparity that exists within organizations. Guys, I must say that I've learned so much from this discussion. I was taking copious notes, and I'm sure that the guys from the PRCA will actually, I'm hoping that they'll do like a key findings document from this to circulate, because so much rich and valuable stuff came out of this discussion. that I think it would be useful for people like me and those who were actually part of this discussion to use within their organization. So I'd just like to say thank you very much for taking your time out, Caren, Emily, Melissa, Alex, to be part of the panel, and for those of you who took time out from your day, your work to attend the event, on behalf of the group at PRCA. I'd just like to say a big thank you for that. So I don't know if Kara is back on yet, and I'd just like to either hand over to her or Kuldeep if there's anything else that they'd like to say before we close out.
No, thank you, Romeo. I think that was a perfect summary for a fantastic afternoon. I think just to reiterate, thank you again to all our speakers this afternoon. Massively valuable contribution to the conversation, and hopefully a conversation that between us and further afield we can continue to have, across the industry and with broader members of our teams. And thank you also to all of the attendees again for taking the time out. I'm sure everybody would be happy to be connected with via the relevant social networks, so do feel free to connect after this session. But yeah, I think if we draw it to a close there, and we can pick up any strands as we need to.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.